Twilight settled over the Mitchell estate as lanterns flickered to life across the manicured garden. Laughter drifted among the guests, but at the far edge of the property a small figure pressed against the iron gate. 7-year-old Emma Chen, shivering in a torn jacket, her eyes locked on the billionaire's pregnant wife as if watching a tragedy unfold in slow motion. Inside, Isabella Mitchell lifted a tall glass of orange juice while her husband, Alexander, whispered something warm against her shoulder. Before she could respond, a thin, cracking voice shot through the evening air. "Mrs. Mitchell, don't drink that. Something's wrong. Please." Guests turned sharply. Isabella blinked, startled. Alexander stepped forward, scanning the frightened child whose fear looked too real to dismiss. Emma gripped the bars tighter. "It's the middle glass. They touched it when no one was looking. Don't let it hurt your babies." For a breathless moment, the celebration fell silent. Then Alexander saw it, the faint, crystalline shimmer clinging to the rim under the garden lights. And just like that, the perfect world around him began to crack. To follow the rest of this shocking story, like the video and subscribe to Canada's Heartfelt Tales. The glass slipped from Isabella's hand before it ever touched her lips, landing with a sharp crack against the stone pathway. Juice splashed in a bright arc, staining the hem of her dress as gasps rippled through the stunned guests. Alexander didn't flinch at the mess. He was already moving toward the tray, instinct tightening around him like a belt. Something about the way the middle glass shimmered, a delicate dust catching the lantern light, sent a cold ripple down his spine. Behind him, Harold snapped. "Alexander, control yourself. You're embarrassing this family." But Alexander didn't look back. He lifted the ruined glass stem gingerly, and even from that careful distance, he saw the faint crystalline residue clinging to the rim. His breath stalled. It wasn't dust. It wasn't sugar. It was something else. Something deliberate. He turned toward the gate where Emma still stood, small and trembling, breath clouding in the cool twilight. Her hands were wrapped around the bars as if bracing for impact. "Who showed you the drinks?" Alexander asked, voice strained. "No one," Emma answered softly. "I just saw him touch it." "Him who?" Emma's chin lifted despite her shaking. She pointed toward the cluster of men near the bar. Her finger didn't waver. It didn't need to. She pointed straight at Harold Mitchell. A hush smothered the party. Harold's eyes widened, just for a heartbeat, before he forced out a harsh laugh. "That child is delusional. She has no idea what she's talking about." But Richard, standing beside him, shifted uneasily, jaw tightening. And Isabella, still gripping her stomach protectively, whispered, "Alex, what if she's telling the truth?" The question cut deeper than anything Harold could have said. Alexander turned toward the gates. He didn't know Emma, yet something about her frightened, pleading eyes stirred a memory he couldn't quite reach. "Bring her inside," he ordered. "Absolutely not," Harold barked. "This is my home." "It's my home too," Alexander said, voice lowering to something dangerous. "And my children were nearly killed tonight." The guards hesitated, torn between the Patriarch and the heir who actually commanded their respect. Then they opened the gate. Emma stepped in slowly, like a stray who had learned not to trust a hand even when it was offered gently. Her shoes left small wet prints across the marble. She kept glancing around the lavish space, not with envy but with an alertness that spoke of survival. Alexander knelt in front of her. "Your name?" "Emma," she whispered. "Emma Chin." Something inside him shattered. A name he hadn't spoken aloud in nearly a decade. A name tied to a woman he once loved so deeply it had terrified him. Before he could ask another question, Isabella clutched his arm. "Alex, look." Dr. Martinez, who had arrived within minutes of a frantic call, was examining the shards with clinical urgency. He straightened, face pale. "This wasn't an accident," he said quietly. "This substance is toxic, highly concentrated. Whoever prepared this wanted a very specific outcome." A murmur rolled through the guests like thunder. Harold stepped forward. "Doctor, you must be mistaken. I'm not mistaken, Dr. Martinez cut in sharply. This was intentional poisoning. And like a string pulled too tight, everything snapped. Isabella covered her mouth. Alexander rose slowly, turning toward his father. Did you know about this? Harold's voice was smooth, practiced. Of course not. Why would I ever harm my own family? Emma tugged Alexander's sleeve. He wasn't alone, she whispered. The other man, the one with the phone, keeps looking at the babies like he wishes they weren't coming. Richard swallowed hard. Isabella's breath shook. Richard, did you know anything about this? I don't have to answer that, Richard spat. Guests began backing away, forming a silent ring around the unfolding truth. The air felt tighter, heavier. The Mitchell empire was beginning to rot in real time, and everyone could smell it. Alexander looked around the crowd, then back at Emma. How did you see all this? You were behind the gate. I see things, she murmured. Mama called it my gift. Mama, he repeated. Emma nodded. Maria. Maria Chin. The world tilted. Isabella touched her husband's arm, sensing the ground shifting beneath him. Alex! He couldn't breathe for a moment. Memories, long buried, flared like sparks. A young woman laughing as she tucked her hair behind her ear. Nights sharing secrets. Dreams whispered in cheap diners. Promises he had once meant with all his heart. But then came his father. The threats. The ultimatum. And the silence he'd been forced into. Alexander's voice broke. Maria had a daughter. Emma nodded. She said my daddy was a good man. She said you didn't know. Harold's face tightened, a mask cracking at the edges. Alexander's fury finally found its direction. You hid this from me, he whispered. You hid my own child from me. Before Harold could answer, Dr. Martinez rushed forward. We need to get Isabella somewhere safe. This could have been fatal for her and the twins. That was the moment Alexander understood. This wasn't a family dispute. This was a war. Inside the private study, the atmosphere thickened. The walls, lined with centuries of Mitchell wealth, seemed to lean inward like silent witnesses to the unraveling legacy. Emma sat on the edge of the leather chair, small legs dangling. She kept glancing at the windows, hands clasped tightly in her lap. Isabella rested on a sofa while Dr. Martinez checked her vitals. Alexander stood nearby, torn between protectiveness and rage. Emma, he said softly, tell me exactly what you saw. She didn't hesitate. Your father walked to the drinks table when the lady in red started singing. He poured something in the middle glass. Then your brother sent a message to someone. They both watched Mrs. Mitchell the whole time. Alexander turned to Harold. Tell me she's lying. Harold didn't flinch. I don't answer to a street child. Emma lowered her gaze, but only for a moment. Mama said bad people hate the truth most when it comes from someone small. Richard barked a laugh, but it didn't reach his eyes. Dr. Martinez cleared his throat. I've confirmed intent. I've contacted law enforcement. You did what? Harold snapped. You tried to murder my wife and children. Alexander shouted. What did you expect? Richard stepped forward. Shut up, Alex. You're not thinking clearly. You tried to kill my family. Alexander roared. I'm thinking perfectly clearly. He pulled Emma protectively to his side. Harold's expression hardened into something cold and reptilian. Fine. Since the facade is broken, let's speak plainly. Your marriage ruined everything. Your children will shatter the inheritance structure. That woman, he pointed at Isabella, was never meant to be part of this family. Isabella's voice trembled. We loved you. We respected you. Why? Because power, Harold said, is not shared. It is protected. And murder is how you protect it. Alexander whispered. Harold didn't answer. He didn't have to. Richard reached into his jacket. Emma's voice was barely breath. Daddy, he has a gun. Time fractured. Alexander grabbed Emma and pulled her behind him. Isabella cried out. Dr. Martinez backed toward the wall. Richard lifted the weapon with no hesitation. Only calculation. You were always the mistake, Richard hissed. You and your little charity projects and your pathetic conscience. Father and I built this empire. You were just the puppet meant to smile for cameras. The door burst open. Police. Drop the weapon. But Richard fired first. The bullet slammed into the bookshelf inches from an officer's shoulder. Officers shouted commands. Harold lunged, not to surrender, but to grab something hidden beneath the desk. Emma squeezed her eyes shut. There's another gun, she whispered. Where? Alexander asked. By your father's left hand. Alexander lunged. Harold fired, narrowly missing him. Another shot rang out. Police returning fire. Richard dove behind a chair, shooting wildly. The study exploded into chaos. Emma clung to Alexander, trembling but alert. Daddy, behind you.